Hello students, it's Dr. Ismaniza again. Today we are going to learn about temperature extremes. In this topic, we will look at the hazards posed by extremes of temperatures in the form of heat stress. You might wonder, how hot can it be in a workplace, especially if your workplace is air-conditioned? Well, it may have slipped your mind that some heavy industries like steel mills, smelters, foundries and building construction expose the workers to this physical hazard. Since the human body functions at moderate climate, extreme heat can affect the core body temperature and result in serious physiological injuries or illnesses, such as heat stress and heat strain. What is the difference between the two? Well, heat stress is the net heat load to which a worker is exposed to that occurs when the body's means of controlling its internal temperature starts to fail. Meanwhile, heat strain is the body's physiological responses to heat stress that release excess heat from the body, such as increased in-heart rate, elevated core temperature, and sweating. To manage heat stress, we need to control the net heat gain or loss from the body. This can be done by balancing both the environmental and non-environmental parameters or internal factors. The environmental parameters meant here include air temperature, radiant temperature, humidity, and air movement. Air temperature, as it is called, is the temperature of air surrounding the human body that determines the heat flow between the body and the air. In contrast, radiant temperature refers to the heat radiated from a hot surface. As for humidity, it deals with the sweat generated by the human body that evaporates and is lost to the surrounding environment. Air movement may be easier to be imagined as the wind, or air velocity intensity blowing in all directions. So now that you understand these factors, perhaps you can imagine how to assist farmers and miners who work in hot work environment to minimize the heat stress. Moving on to non-environmental parameters that influence the transfer of heat into or out of the human body, we have metabolic heat and clothing. Metabolic heat is related to metabolism, such as heat accumulation in the body from the food that we eat, oxygen that we breathe in, and the total energy produced. As for clothing that affects thermal behavior of clothing, it can help in the evaporation of sweat, thus cooling the body. Just imagine, what about the clothing material used for firefighters? They have to be sturdy, fire retardant, and also at the same time kind of comfortable for them to work during chaotic situations such as fires. Anyway, whether or not a worker is easily affected by hot conditions, it depends on several factors. Acclimatization is gradual physiological adaptation that improves an individual's ability to tolerate heat stress, usually in 10 to 14 days. It requires physical activity under heat stress conditions similar to those anticipated for the work. Also, physical fitness. Typically, obese workers may find it harder to handle heat stress. It may also depend on age, where older workers have more difficulty working in a hot environment. If a worker consumes alcohol or drugs, it may also lead to dehydration and increase his susceptibility to heat stress. Heat stress may also be affected by workload. For instance, hard work that requires great effort or exertion work are more likely to suffer from heat-induced illnesses. Last but not least, atmospheric conditions. These include direct sunlight and radiant heat that can obviously increase heat stress conditions. So, to conclude, heat stress can be managed by controlling environmental and non-environmental parameters. It is also useful to identify the factors that can potentially affect the workers to develop heat-induced conditions, so the associated health effects can be prevented. I will leave you with one question to ponder. If wearing coveralls while working in a hot work environment makes it very hot for a miner, should they be allowed to work without wearing their protective clothing? That's about it. I'll see you next time. Goodbye.